All right, let's bring it on back. Bring it on back. I'm going to ask you for your questions, and then after you give me a few questions, I'm going to walk through the slides we actually did and illustrate the tools for decision making. But first, I'll get your questions because those will you'll see how those fit into the tools. Who's got a question for Harry and myself to help us make a wise choice on where to live? Yes, please.
How much money do you have?
How much money do we have? Well, I guess that's how much money we want to spend. One of my partners had just bought a house, and we talked to her loan broker, and we got approved for an amount up to X. Okay? We ended up paying 1.2 times X, but so we had that amount, and what that did is there cut out some homes that were even more than that. So just as soon as we have that one, I'm going to call it given. Given, it's going to be in the realm of X. All right. That gives some guidance, not everything, but some guidance. I like that. What else, folks? Yes, please. House, apartment, or condo. We had been condo folks saving up for the trip, and we just needed to own something. We didn't want people dancing around our heads like you get in a condo. We didn't want to rent. We've been living out of a carry-on bag for 12 months. And so we didn't do anything, we didn't do any economics on it. It's not that we ran a spreadsheet and said, hey, it's cheaper to buy. We said, we're going to buy because we just need to have something that we own, because we've been rootless for so long. That wasn't necessarily a rational decision, but it doesn't matter. As long as both Harriet and I have alignment on it, it doesn't matter if it was an emotional decision, rational, we don't have to prove that it's right. We're the decision makers, and we agree, we're going to buy something. Okay? What else?
Distance from work.
What's that?
Distance from the work.
Well, you know, it's interesting, because if you think about it, it takes about 45 minutes to drive from Palo Alto up to UCSF with no traffic.
At 4 in the morning.
Yeah. If there's there's not often no traffic. And so what we said was neither of our commutes would be longer than 40 minutes. And that's another given. Now, what does that do to our map? Can we live up in Sausalito?
No.
I can't get down to Palo Alto in 40 minutes. Can we live across the Bay Bridge over in Berkeley? Can't do it. So what does that 40 minutes do? It basically cuts off everything north of Harriet's work and everything south of mine. But then we think about who are the players and what do they want. The players, the people who are going to be, whose perspective should be considered in making this decision, were myself and Harriet.
And my mom was very interested.
Nina wanted to have input. And in fact, she gave input, but she did not get any decision-making authority. One of the things that messes you up time and again in decisions is being too free with who gets a vote. I'm happy to get opinions from a lot of folks, but you have to be very careful about who makes a decision, and who will that be. I'll show you a rule as the slides go on. Okay? So what we said was Harriet and I will make the decision, and on Harriet, what she wanted a short commute. And down farther on her list was my commute. Now, I had the same thing. I had her commute above mine. Is that just because I'm a heck of a guy? Why might that make sense? She's going back and forth, driving after call. It's dark. I go in once a week to the office. The rest of the time, I'm at my client's site. Okay, so it made sense. Now, what does that do to our map? What does that? It tends to bump us up. It tends to bump us up north. So basically, I can cut this off. I can cut that off. And so now, as Harriet and I are having these discussions, we're floating around the Amazon. We're at this place where factory does the idea of faxing back and forth. And we're talking about, we're not seeing any houses yet. We're just talking about what kind of place would we want? What kind of attributes would we want? What other questions would you ask us?
Opportunities for education of kids, if there are any kids in the equation.
Well, here's an interesting thought. We came out with another given saying, we don't care about school districts. Now that seems a little harsh for most people, but we said we just don't care. And let me ask you this. Harry and I didn't have any children at the time. If you've never had a child in a school district before, how many credible distinctions could you make about the relative quality of private and public schools at least 6 years from today in 5 days looking for a house? And what we realized is there was no way we could bring any insight by studying the question of schools. And rather than doing a bad job on it and at best confusing ourselves, we said we're just going to ignore this. Now, we had some protection in terms of X gives us some level of protection on public schools, but that's as far as we went. What else you want to ask us? Yes, please.
Your environment.
I mean, do you want to live in an urban setting? Do you want to live, in a suburb? Do you want to be on the water?
Well, that was one of the things we had to decide, that there were certain neighborhoods. One thing in terms of our environment, what we said was, we're not going to live in the fog. We had a friend, Lars and Dale, live in the fog, and it was not pretty. And so that was a little sliver above there in the city, by Harriet's work, we could live in. Less than 40 minutes commute, not in the fog zone. And then going south here, there are a few cities there, but we couldn't decide, we could look at either in the city or up, going down in the cities on the peninsula. And that makes a difference. So you're down here in the flats, where your money goes farther because you don't have a view, or you have a view and you can't afford a bigger house, because you can either afford a big house or a view, but you can't afford a boat. At least not for us. Okay? Yes, please.
Do you have any other interest that support to be near a particular site for those interests?
We said one of the key things on both of our lists, Harriet and mine, is access to nature and outdoors. So we didn't have a specific thing, but the nature and outdoors tends to be more up the hill, up on the 287. So what does that tend to do? That tends to push us north for Harriet's commute and maybe up the hill to the west. That's actually going up the hill to go to the west in order to get the access to nature and outdoors. It doesn't say exactly where we're going to live, but all of a sudden now, instead of 2.5 million, maybe we've only got 250,000 left. Who's got another question for us? Yes, please.
The size, like how many bedrooms?
Well, that was nothing. That was something we have to trade off. We look at some neighborhoods we can afford a big house, other neighborhoods we couldn't afford something. And so in fact, we're going to have to look at different combinations of those. But any combination we look at has to make sense with all of our givens. Has to be out of the fog belt. If it's in the fog belt, we're not going to look. Has to be less than 40-minute drive, etc. Less than X, all those types of things. Okay. One more, yes please.
Are there any particular attributes? Does your wife never cook with gas or electric? Or are there any particular features you just have to have?
Well, we did have, we had some things in terms of things like landscaping and gardening that we said, that may be important to us, but that we're going to hold off till later. We're not going to let that confuse us. We can always fix that problem later on. We didn't have necessarily, well, we have to have a pool or something, we're not swimmers, those type of things. So there really wasn't that much on that. Let me show you the slides. Oh,
I would say there was one thing,
go ahead.
we're moving in. We are not renovating. That was a very key point.
I was willing to, I don't know if any of you are project folks or love to do things, I was willing to put in a cat door. That was it. So, we've been looking for a place we're going to buy. It's got to be ready to move in. It's got to be less than X. It's got to be outside the fog belt. It's got to be within 40 minutes. All of a sudden, we're starting to wonder, not just 2.5 million, but are there any houses that fit? If we have too many constraints, there may be nothing left. In which case, we're going to have to say, well, which one are we going to loosen? Okay? Let me show you the slides we actually sent to the realtor.
And this is true. We actually sent these slides to the realtor.
We start where everyone starts, with our home buying mission statement. What are we doing? Focused housing search in the San Francisco Bay Area with the intention of buying a house, making an offer, and having accepted in a total of 5 days. Why are we doing it? If we don't succeed in buying a house during this window, we'll make our lives hell for 6 months and try and restart our jobs, move into temporary housing, and look for a permanent house. People were telling us at the time, geez, this is lunacy to try and move so fast, but what we were worried about is not getting the wrong, we could live with a suboptimal house. But if we didn't get a house, we sought for the perfect house and didn't find it, our lives would be a disaster as we try and do everything. So we had pretty clear in mind, we got to make this thing work. How we know if we succeed, have an offer accepted in a house, developing our key objectives, have it accepted by Friday, August 25th, close, move in by Monday, October 9th. So, next slide. First tool, when you think about decision making, are clarifying objectives. And when you think clarifying objectives, you ask, who are the players and what do they want? The more players you have, the more complex the things the issue gets. In this case, we had only 2 players. Harriet and myself. Neither was willing to delegate this to the other. I wasn't willing to delegate to Harriet, and she wasn't willing to delegate to me. Which means we're going to have to look at alternatives that make sense to both of us. As Harriet said, her mom Nina wanted a column. She wanted to have a say. She didn't get one. Okay. By adding more decision makers, that doesn't help. That makes the problem more complex. You only add it if you need it. In this case, we didn't need Nina's help. When you think about who are the players and what do they want, you say, what's the single most important thing for that player? What's the second most, third, fourth? So for Harriet, it's location with nice weather, her commute, access to nature, large enough for kids, my commute down below. For me, the most important thing is location, attractive home and grounds, heritage commute mine, ready to move in, no major projects. Next. Even in a small table like that, there's still 10 things, and that's a lot, so we looked at, well, what subset will we use for decision criteria? And we circled those. So if we had a house, location with nice weather showed them both. We had a house that scored well on location with nice weather, heritage commute, access to nature, attractive home, and my commute. That would be a pretty good house for us. So these became our decision criteria that we could use to rate the different houses. We also used a gut feel, but this is more of a rational basis as a check. We wanted to do both ways, both the gut feel and the brain. Next. The most important tool for decision making, at least that I found in 25 years, is called the decision hierarchy. It says what decisions can we take as given, like no fog belt, no more than 40-minute commute. Those are givens. The more givens we have, the more clear we are on exactly what problem we're trying to solve. What decision are we going to make in this effort, and what are we going to hold till later? What we said we're going to hold till later are minor fix-ups and landscaping. That's not, we're going to just ignore those, we'll fix that later. What we're going to decide in this effort is how big a house, how many bedrooms, where is it going to be, and does it have a view or not? Our givens, many of which you've given me, we're looking to buy, not rent, because we felt like we had to own something. We'll not make an offer for more than X, and we'll make only serious offers that demand attention. Now, why are we trying to lowball it here? Why don't we try and get a cheap house? Not enough time. We can't really monkey around. So we're going to have to pay up for a house. That's a trade-off we're willing to make. We're willing to pay a little bit more money. We're not going to look for the cheapest house, but we've got to get one fast. Heritage communities more weight than mine, neither more than 40, won't live in fog, not fix-it types. We had a given here. We don't care about the style of house. We're going to, we thought we're going to live inside the house, not outside, and what we care about is inside. Well, we started looking at houses when we actually got out to San Francisco. It turns out we're way shallower than that. That there are a lot of houses we just looked at and said, no, I'm not going to live there at all. It just doesn't make sense. And so that was a given we thought was given, and we had to realize as we went through the process and learned more, that really wasn't a given. In fact, we had some real strong preferences on style of house. Not trying to evaluate the quality of school district, make one mark from the first few days. Next. I'll go back to it, sorry. If you look at the number of bedrooms, city, suburb, quality view, these are the 3 decisions we said we have to make now in these 5 days. These we made before. These we made while we were floating in the Amazon. But now we have to say how big, where, quality view. Next slide. There's a tool called the decision table, which said if those are your decisions, number of bedrooms, city, suburb, quality view, what are the options inside each column? Well, number of bedrooms, 3, 4, or 5. City or suburb, up in San Francisco, just north of the fog belt. Then if you go south of the fog belt, the peninsula cities, Millbrae, south of that is Burlingame, south of that is Hillsborough. And Burlingame costs more than Millbrae, Hillsborough costs more than Burlingame. And then quality view, either in the city, the suburb, or the hillside view. Next. Well, if those are our options for the decisions we have to make now, what combinations would make sense? If we look up north of the fog belt by Harriet's office, you have what we call city living. We call this. We put a couple words on to call it rather than say the green circle strategy. So we just needed a couple words to refer to city living. The houses there were smaller houses. They didn't have a lot of big houses. So it's basically 3-bedroom in the city, and you have a city view. Almost pretty straightforward. We had 2 other families of homes though that seemed like they made sense for us. That fit with the no fog, 40 minutes, all those things. One was called landed gentry, which is let's get as big a home as we can find. We could get a 5-bedroom home. We couldn't afford Hillsborough, but we could afford Millbrae and Burlingame. And we couldn't afford a big home with a view, so it would have to be flat. Room with a view, another family of homes. We'll get a medium-sized house, still couldn't afford Hillsborough, but we'd have a view. So all of a sudden we have 3 families of homes. We haven't seen any. We don't know if any of these exist yet. But if they do, if there is such a thing out there, it would really address a lot of the things that we care about, and it would ignore a lot of things that don't make sense for us. Next slide. So now we have a problem that's delegatable. We sent the information to the realtor. She came back and she said there are 45 houses which seem to fit what you want. for sale today, ready to move in, not in the fog belt, 4-day community, all those things. There were 16 up just north of the fog belt, 16 of those city living types. There were 13 room with views, and there were 16 landed gentries. For sale, multiple listing service, right then. We came in Sunday night, and we saw all 45 on Monday and Tuesday, 2 days. We saw 45 houses. 45 houses in 2 days. Because think about, one of the things that causes people to hold on a decision is because they wonder, geez, maybe there's something better out there. We didn't see a sampling, we saw a census. We saw every single one. And our goal was not to say, how could this be our house? Our goal was to say, as quickly as we possibly could, how can we convince ourselves this is not the house for us? Because we didn't want to spend time where it didn't make sense. Too often we agonize over things that we don't really want. So our goal was to, as quick as we can, say, no, this isn't the house for us. Okay? We ended up with 4 houses, 1 favorite and 3 backup. Next slide. And we rated them on a rational basis using our decision criteria from that circle slide before. Location, that's whether Heritage Commute, attractive home and grounds. We found the city living were great for Heritage Commute, but not so good for everything else. The landed gentry were solid, but the room with the view really scored well on all the things we seemed to care about. And when we imagined ourselves living in that house, the room with the view really sort of met our gut feel. Those are the houses that seemed most attractive to us. Next slide. So some thoughts about how we made this decision. We discussed decision criteria ahead of the time. What does Harriet want? What does Leah want? What are the givens? Okay, we had all those set before we even looked at a house. We planned ahead, had the loan pre-approved. We didn't agonize over things we couldn't find out about. If there was uncertainty like housing, like school district, we just ignored it. By doing so, we had a huge advantage over normal home buyers. Tuesday night, midnight, we wrote an offer for our favorite house. It was a solid offer, like 2% less than asking price. Wrote it at midnight Tuesday. The offer expired Wednesday at noon. How much competition is there on Wednesday morning between 9 o'clock when the realtor got to work and noon when the offer expired?
0.
None. So we had to market to ourselves. 11:45, they said yes. So it took us a little under 2.5 days. By Friday, there were 2 back-off offers in, one for 15% more than we had offered, but there was no way for him to get out of the contract. Okay. Next slide. So that was our room in Burlingame. Harry's on the left, I'm on the right, and yours look exactly the same, so it's actually hard to tell. Next slide, and that was our view. Okay. So we didn't, think about how this could have gone bad. We could have gone, suppose on Sunday night we get in, man, it's been 12 months, back in the US, let's go see some buddies up in Sausalito. We go up to Sausalito, we have a wonderful dinner. Oh, the house next to us is for sale. You guys gotta buy that. That, I would argue, would be one of the worst things that could possibly happen, because now we fall in love with a house. It might be the perfect house, but it messes up our lives. Because it ruins the commute, all the things we don't want. So we didn't look at anything that didn't fit our givens. Does that make sense? Okay. We did all the work ahead of time to understand what is it that we want. Now let's only look at those things, and that's where we'll look for the right answer for us. Where we're not going to look at things outside of our givens, because that might be a better house, but not a better life. Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts on the home buying example? By the way, Harriet mentioned this is a very painful process. She likes when I give this case, so because she thinks it makes me look like a freak, and so she gets her psychic reward. So
I got to tell you the story of meeting with the loan broker. And we said, when do we have to have our offer accepted in order to move into the house, in order to close on October 9th? He said, that's not how it works. And Leo said, well, humor me. If it did work that way, August 29th, we went, okay then. And we had it done, August 23rd. So it's interesting when you use this approach because people just aren't expecting it. But when you get them to go along with it, I think he still tells stories about how we bought our house in 2.5 days.
The question is, were you able to enjoy your time on the Amazon, or did you spend all your time figuring out all these?
Our time on the Amazon would have been better, except the particular resort that was floating we were in was infested with cockroaches, and our guide would I think it's been a little too much time in Berkeley in the sixties. And he'd take us out in the woods and say, there's over 25,000 species in the Amazon rainforest, and this is one of them. So we have plenty of time to be thinking about houses.
All right, next slide. Let me go through that's sort of a specific example. Now let me go through the general approach and ideas behind decision making. Any decision, large or small, has 7 attributes. Here they are. First is objectives. When you think about objectives, think who are the players, what do they want? Harriet wants a short commute, we want a place where you have kids, etc. The goal is not to make everyone want the same things they won't. The goal is to say who gets a vote, so who gets a column, and what's the most important thing, second, third, fourth. Next slide. Structuring says how we define a decision. Structuring is really done with the decision hierarchy, with those givens, what are you going to focus on now, what are you going to hold till later. So we say no fog, etc. That helps structure it. It cuts